our current political climate, our current, you know, the media we consume, like whatever medium that is, if we don't have the education to understand how problematic it is. So
media
like,
literacy.
Yes.
Amen. That is the
but
one
even
thing
just
we
like
don't
basic
have
education, like
so
our
much.
school systems are failing. Sex ed, like it is so much bigger than just.
But it's
one
because we moved into this, it's because our entire culture has moved into this space where we used to see people who were smarter than us, and we used to aspire to be them. And now we see people who are smarter than us, and they make us feel inferior, so something has to be wrong with them, and we've begun to demonize people for knowing more than we do. Because clearly it couldn't be that I don't know enough. I'm the pure and original people. So I clearly know enough, so the fact that you know more than me immediately makes you the other, and now you're the bad guy. So we've actually made education, made knowledge an act of deviance in our society. Knowing stuff is bad, which is why we vote for people, because they look like someone we want to have a beer with.
God. Anyone in this room wants to have a beer with Trump.
Recently, someone was talking about why idiocracy is actually a utopia compared to our current political situation. Because in idiocracy, they pick the smartest guy to be the leader of the nation. They're like,
shocking.
You're the smartest one. You clearly should be the one leading us.
Right?
Whereas now, if somebody, it's exactly that. If somebody's smarter than us, it is threatening, almost, or you feel like they're looking down on you and that they're not a person of the people.
I want my president to be smarter than me. I want my leaders to be so infinitely smarter than me that I am comically stupid.
Yes.
Like I want like wires coming out of their head and sparks flying back and forth. I want them to be so much smarter than me that I pale in comparison. And I don't understand where we as a culture lost that.
Is the
When mediocrity became the aspiration.
maybe the assumption is that if somebody is smarter than you, they're working against you to get stuff. That if somebody were that much smarter than you, they would use their smarts to get all of the money and power, and that we don't want people to have that because we have a consumerist culture, and having things and the ability to get more things is like the highest aspiration that you can achieve.
Thinking breaks the system.
Well, and I think also
train our children not to think.
there is like, I don't think this is like the largest part of it, but I also think that there is like a resentment towards education and knowledge because so many people have been denied access to it. So like, for instance, I have spent a lot of time working in like extremely like rural communities where like they actively resent folks who have college educations, because in a lot of these like, you know, conversations we have around things like poverty and, you know, shortcomings with the education system, to put it kindly, like very rural communities get completely left out of that discussion. That being said, there's nothing positive necessarily being done for urban or like rural populations, but because of that mentality and the way it's framed in a lot of political conversations, that has set up a resentment towards those things and those opportunities, which is like, I think again, one of the things about the capitalist consumerist structure is you begin to pin each people against each other, certain groups, communities, demographics, it gets them to hate each other and then tear each other down, versus looking at the actual structures that are, you know, putting some of these things in place.
But we've completely derailed this conversation.
Yeah, sorry.
Let's talk about sex. What else do you want to know?
Alright,
Let's talk about sex.
Double check if there's any questions.
Okay, so kind of getting back onto like that subject. So how do you feel like media's portrayal of deviant sexuality, so like going back to the 50 Shades of Grey conversation, how do you feel like the media portrayals with like something like that contributes to violence, and how does like seeing incorrect like uses of consent and things like that contribute to what's actually happening and the problems that we're having within our society?
Well, I don't think, I have yet to see like one truly great like you know, very like popular movie or TV show talk about consent in a healthy way. Like, I don't think I've seen like one. And I think, you know, that's kind of leaving everyone in a horrible situation because, you know, I think there are like a small number of like violent perpetrators. But I think when no one has an understanding of what consent means, then, you know, people are behaving in those ways that like they might not be sexual predators, but because they've never been taught that you need to have a conversation about everything you do, they don't know to do that. And, you know, when we're seeing like romantic comedies that are, you know, talking about boundaries in the way that like, you know, this very like gendered language, but kind of a typical narrative of like a guy asks a girl to go on a date and she says no, and then 10 minutes later he asks again and she says no, and then all of a sudden somehow by the end of the movie they're like riding off into the sunset. Like, those things might not even portray sex whatsoever, but those are sending us messages about what consent and boundaries mean, and they're not sending us good messages. They're sending the message that no means convince me, or try harder, or all of these different things, and I think like 50 Shades of Grey is, you know, as you said, portraying like a community that is like very valid because they value consent and conversation. But when it's portrayed in this way that is, you know, kind of fulfilling in a large stage what like a lot of young people are seeing in porn, or, you know, that consent doesn't matter, but these like very like aggressive like sexual behaviors are like good, then it's like continuing to perpetuate those conversations, or lack of conversation. Sorry,
But-
I think I went on some weird tangents.
No, I don't think you did, but I think there's a piece of this that's missing, which is that culture doesn't get created in a vacuum. We don't talk about consent in this culture. People in this room don't talk about consent. People in this room don't even demonstrate consent. You don't, because that's not the way we're taught sex works. You talk about it, you're ruining the moment. And so what ends up happening is nobody actually goes through a process of giving or receiving consent. And so people just, whatever's happening seems to be okay until you tell me it's not okay. And then we just, if everything happens and nobody was mad, then we had consent. Because that's the way our culture is. So, if you're brought up in a culture in which nobody models actual consent, then when you're in a position to make culture, you go from what you know, which is we don't have consent, we just, whatever's gonna happen, and then that's the way that it goes, and then that's being portrayed in media, which is how people learn about sex largely in our culture, which is why we don't have consent talks in this culture. It's circular. It's not that anyone's maliciously, you know, putting aggressive sex acts in, well, there are people who are doing that, but it's not that, the aggressive sex acts as non-consent is the easy stuff to fix. That's the easy thing to fix. That's not the problem that we have in this culture. The problem we have in this culture isn't violent and aggressive sex acts. The problem we have in this culture is the lack of willingness to engage in conversation before you have sex with someone. And that is not something that's going to change or be fixed overnight. It's just not.